All right, on today's show, we have Dr. Brad Christensen. Brad, it's great to have you here on the show. All right, so hey, you have jumped in here like with a flurry on wildfire, catching hold of our STEM program, taking what was really a non-existent program and really starting a brand new program in some pretty cool spaces. I think sometimes when something is so successful, you can almost take it for granted that maybe it was always there. But you and I remember kind of what this has been. So I would love for us to, now that we've been in this for 5 years, I'd love for us to jump in and kind of talk a little bit about STEM as a whole, nationally and internationally, and also kind of where that passion is for you. But before we kind of jump into kind of the big picture, let's talk small picture just a little bit. Tell us how you even got here.
Well, that's an interesting story, and it's certainly God working in my life through a series of circumstances. But I started as a shop teacher, and I was going to be a shop teacher. That was my plan, and I started a smallest school in Nebraska. It was about the same size as a Nebraska School of the Deaf. We graduate about 5 kids a year.
Wow, okay.
But I started there as an industrial arts teacher. Thought I'd probably stay with industrial arts and teaching wood shop and power mechanics and all that. And but
was this fresh out of college?
Yes, this was in '84. I started, and but I began to realize that there were a lot of curriculum changes taking place. Of course, STEM wasn't a word yet then,
right?
But we started thinking about ways that our pedagogy could be applied larger. And so I was doing my woodworking classes, and we were building cedar chests and gun cabinets like everybody else did, and started thinking about how we could expand this. And so I realized that we had some shortage with curriculum. There just was no curriculum available for that type of idea. And so I went back for a master's degree and then a doctorate in how do you teach with projects? Mm-hmm. How can we capitalize on that excitement that I saw my students coming in and using tools and figuring things out, and the confidence that they gained by doing that. During my doctoral program, I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Franzi Lepp at Illinois State University. He's an amazing mentor, and I just thoroughly enjoyed him, learned a lot from him, but worked under him as a graduate assistant developing the Integrated Mathematics Science Technology program. It ended up being a series of 16 books, 16 thematic books that the student would carry to their math class, then their science class, then their technology engineering class. It was if all 3 teachers stayed pretty much on schedule, the students saw this integration all day long. But what really excited me about that program was it was written in a constructivist. It was written in a learning cycle format based on the constructivist theory of learning. Mm-hmm. I had never heard of that before. Mm-hmm. And I thought, constructivist, that means you build something. Well, yes, in a way it does. You build your understanding. Now, you're not creating, you're not constructing, you're not building your own truth. Truth is objective, it is solid, it is unwavering. But our understanding of that truth, our understanding of concepts, our understanding of the world around us, our understanding of social interactions are all things that we construct mentally. Mm-hmm. It's a cognitive process. And so this learning cycle process used that to introduce a concept. We always start with a project. Every lesson started with a project. And then we discussed it. And then we applied it. And then we expanded it, and then we assessed it. And when I started seeing how that worked, I thought, oh, wow, this is great stuff. So I thought, let's run with this. And graduated, went down to Berea College. I was a professor there, teacher education, using a lot of these constructivist ideas, projects, learning, so on. Went back to Illinois State for 10 years, worked as an author and developed more materials. And then, but along the way, while I was teaching in Iowa, for example, back in 1992, I approached our superintendent, and I described this room to our superintendent. That was, 35 years ago. And he looked at me kind of funny. He said, that sounds like a great idea. But he said, if we have a bad budget year, he said, you'd be the first to go.
Right.
And at the time, I didn't really appreciate that, but I realized now he had my best interest in mind. But I thought this could really be cool. And so I've been waiting. 35 years I've been waiting for somebody to do this. And so when I saw online that you had this vacancy, I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. My wife said, you've been waiting 35 years for that. I said, yeah, but I said, do you want to move to Georgia? I said, Decula, some little town in northeast Georgia. I said, I don't know anything about it. Well, then I realized, no, actually we're kind of a suburb of Atlanta. But she said, you've been waiting a long time for this. She says, you need to do this. And so when you see it as starting with an empty room 5 years ago, I see it as a continuation of a 40-year teaching career.
That's great.
Bringing me, God using various situations, various opportunities, mentors, teachers, experiences to come to this, to the point of, yes, finally, I get to do it.
Yeah.
I don't just talk about it. I don't just write about it. I don't just research it. I don't just try to get somebody else to do it. I actually get to do it.
One of the coolest things about leadership that I've just observed and kind of been blessed to see the observation through the years is that the best ideas are rarely hatched from one brain. That you're usually seeing the alignment of a similar vision from multiple people. Both of us being believers, we recognize the spiritual context of that. In that God really does impart a vision for what the future could look like in a particular area. But he rarely does that in the mind of one person. He's usually telling the same story to a bunch of people. It kind of comes back to that Esther quote, for such a time as this, that, when I first had a chance to take you and Libby, your bride, out to lunch across the street at the Mexican place. It was just so cool to be able to chat with somebody who you've met for 5 minutes, and yet you feel like a kindred spirit of 20 years. Because God's been kind of putting the same vision for you 35 years, for me 25 years, that same vision of what applied education looks like. When we talk about the constructivist theory and we think about project-based learning, we understand, well, let me pause then. How about explain that a little bit deeper?
Okay. The most usually we talk. Our teaching involves talking. Teachers is up front, they have a whiteboard, they have a slideshow, whatever it is, but the teacher is presenting information. And the students sit there quietly and soak this in. It doesn't work very well. It just doesn't work very well because the students need a context in which to put things. So if they can start with a project. So traditional instruction, you put the project on Friday. If it goes well, if the kids behave well, if the kids understand what we're talking about, if we have time, we do a project. Oh yeah, we'll do this project. Well, we never have time. And the students never perform well enough. We always have to go on to something else. Oh, sorry guys, we don't have time for the project. The project's got to be a Monday morning thing to me. And we start with a project because by doing that, we give the students a context for the learning. Now, the trick is to come up with a project that works. Now, I'm not saying a project that functions. We can do that. I'm talking about a project that works to reach the educational objectives. So we have something in particular that we want those students to get out of this. And so we come up with a project where they will experience that learning objective. Now, when I talk to teachers, oh, the kids loved it. I said, well, how did it go? Oh, the kids loved it. Yeah, of course the kids loved it. They got to come in here and they got to do something and mess around and have fun. Everybody has fun. But that's not our goal.
Right.
Yes, I want the students to enjoy it. But the students enjoy ice cream. If all that we were concerned about is them enjoying it, let's just spend my budget on ice cream. We don't need this.
Right.
So what's educational? What's the educational value of this? And so they get to experience it. Then we discuss it. We don't talk about it first. We talk about it second. We say, well, what'd you see? Well, I saw that if you hooked up the wires this way, it worked and it ran forward and the propeller turned the right direction and it pulled the airplane forward. And I said, what happens if you hook them up the other way? Well, then it goes backwards. Well, what's going on there? Oh, I think it has something to do with polarity on the motor. Well, do you think every motor works that way? Let's plug in a let's plug in a fan in the wall and put the plug in one way, then flip it over and plug it in the other. Oh, no, that doesn't make a difference. Well, why doesn't it make a difference? Well, it must be some kind of different type of motor or some type of different electricity. Mm-hmm. So now, with a carefully designed and well-executed project, the students now tell the teacher what the teacher would have told the students. Mm-hmm. But it is a series of the right project, conducted in the right way, because it's awfully easy to say, oh, our goal is the project.
That's right.
I really want a nice-looking cedar chest to come out of this, or I really want, everybody to have an airplane that flies really well. Well, no, that's not the top priority. Top priority is their learning.
That's right. And it becomes philosophical.
Yes, it does.
And I think that's probably the greatest misconception that I speak to other heads of school and superintendents, principals, is that they think that STEM education is merely an elective, a cool elective, but an elective.
Yeah, it's a cool elective.
But if you leave STEM education just in the realm of cool elective, then you miss out on the meat and the muscle of what STEM should be doing. Mm-hmm. And when I look at constructivist theory, when I look at project-based learning, the stats on it are really clear. I mean, it's super successful.
Oh, yes.
It's remarkable. I've spent most of my leadership career trying to figure out, why won't people do this? And how do I get to, sometimes as an admin, you can kind of mandate something, but then you don't manage the quality control of it afterwards a whole lot. Yeah. And people just kind of, they end up following what they've always known, kind of the path of least resistance. And so this idea of constructivist theory, it boils, like from a pretty ethereal level, it boils down to like the Socratic method is basically that mindset, right?
It is.
I frame it as the why of education. That's how you've heard me say that 1,000 times in the years that we've worked together. It's the why of education. It's letting a student see how the mathematical principles or scientific principles, or let me say literary principles, historic principles, how they can all apply to this format of learning. That it actually teaches you how to think differently, which in essence is the Socratic method. It's a series of questions. Fast forward that in educational theory and history to Goethe, and you have the same thing. It's the why of education. Fast forward that now to STEM education, and I think it becomes one of those great application points for students to take principles that seem completely unapplied and yet translate it to the classroom where this now has relevance that prior to this STEM classroom, it had no relevance. It was merely something that they memorized for a test. And now it can actually be a principle that they make a living through, that they live through, that they actually say, this could actually change the trajectory of my life. And that is the essence of STEM.
It is. You're exactly right. About 12 years ago, we did some research and discovered that 78% of the students that drop out of high school say they drop out because of Algebra 1. Now, it may not have anything at all to do with Algebra 1. It might be they never attended Algebra 1.
Sure.
Or they may just blame Algebra 1. So it could be a number of things. But we got to thinking, if there's any curriculum or a curricular issue or an instructional issue that could address that 78%, we really owe it to the students to explore that. Maybe if we only just change it a little bit. So we got 20-some, 30 teachers together, Algebra 1 teachers, geometry teacher together for a few weeks, for a few summers. And we took them on field trips looking for Algebra 1. And we didn't find it everywhere, but we found a lot of Algebra 1. And because the question is always, particularly in Algebra 1, when am I ever going to use this stuff? And usually we don't have a very good answer. So we took them on all these field trips looking for Algebra 1. And I told the teachers, so I said, no story problems. And they looked at me really funny, like, that's what we do, is story problems. And I said, no. I said, I do not want story problems. I said, I want you to write lessons that teach this. If they're using Algebra 1 to mix fertilizer at the golf course, I said, I want you to teach them how to mix fertilizer at the golf course using Algebra 1. If they're using Algebra 1 to calculate fuel capacities, range, speed distances of various airplanes at the airport, I want you to teach them how to do that.
That's awesome.
Don't teach them Algebra 1. Teach them how to use Algebra 1, and in the process, they will learn Algebra 1.
That's right.
It was amazing. The teachers really got on board with it. It took a while to get them, get this mindset change. But once they got rolling, they really got rolling on it. They were so excited about that. And we put together a book that is probably has the potential of being quite a influential book of hands-on. It's all hands-on projects. Of course, we wrote everything in this learning cycle format. So everything starts with a project. For example, when they were mixing fertilizer at the golf course, you have potassium, nitrogen, and what's the other one? I don't remember now. Three ingredients of fertilizer that are mixed in different proportions, different percentages. And so we mixed trail mix. We had nuts and M&Ms and something else, marshmallows or something. And so we mixed trail mix and did the mathematics, the Algebra 1 of trail mix, and then applied that to, you have to do the concrete first.
Right.
So many times we start with this really cool, an awesome PowerPoint presentation, thinking that the students are now on board, when in reality, we've got to do something concrete first. They have to get their hands on something first.
Right.
And then we can go to the abstract. So concrete before abstract. So it's CBA. I always talk about the ABCs of teaching. CBA. You start with the concrete. You work your way to the abstract. You do not do it the other way around. The project goes Monday morning, not Friday afternoon. And it just makes a world of difference. Now, can we actually do it?
Right.
And so that's why I was excited about this room.
Right.
I have not found any school in the nation that has a room like this. Well, I take that back. They have rooms like this, but they fill them full of classes.
Right.
And they're not a resource for teachers.
Right. So let's hit two things. One, just so that people can kind of understand your level of expertise, and I know you're a super humble guy, but how many books have you authored or co-authored in your time? I think I know the answers, but I want everybody to understand this.
I'm not sure I know the answer, but I think it's somewhere around 60.
Right.
And like you had said earlier, these are never solo items.
Right.
They're always
it's
collaborative
a team,
efforts.
Sure. Yeah.
And in some cases I led the team, and in some cases I was on the team.
Right.
But about 60, and then when you figure teacher edition, student edition, and then we modified it because there was a time in my career I just really got tired of being supplemental. Mm-hmm. I want to be mainstream.
Sure.
Well, in order to be mainstream, you have to get on statewide adoption. To get on statewide adoption, you have to have a publisher. Mm-hmm. And so we partnered with a publisher when I was at Illinois State, and wrote a bunch of books, and were approved. We had there are like 9 states in the nation that have statewide adoption, and we got approved in 8 of them. So I thought, oh, we're really onto something. Finally, we have STEM-based curriculum that is approved to replace existing math and science curriculum. I thought, this is really onto something. I made $56 in royalties the last 2 years. In fact, the first year they wrote to me and said, it was only $27 this year. Should we write you a check for $27 or wait till next year? I said, let's wait till next year. So this year I get $56. So as excited as I am about it, and for all these books that I've been involved with, and it's been a real learning experience for me.
Right.
Because I get to work with some amazing people, some people that have been thinking and have been practicing education for decades. And when I get to lead a group of 20, 30 of the top educators, it's an environment that I can learn a lot from those folks.
So here's kind of the biggest challenge for guys who are in positions like you and like me. what people will see this kind of education, and I've watched it through the decades, people will see this education, oh, they'll get so fired up over it. I'll meet with other heads, I'll meet with superintendents, they'll get so fired up over it. And then the first time their standardized test scores decrease and the board or the city council, whatever that is, the first time they receive pressure from it, well, then all the things that look kind of gamey, boy, we've got to get rid of all those. What we need to do is get kids back in rows, and they need to, that's what they need to do. They need to learn. And so I've kind of spent my career wondering, okay, how can I make this, rather than a temporary fad, how can we make this permanent? So let's talk about the philosophy of the application of STEM education just a little bit, because we're doing things very different than, frankly, I've seen other schools do it. I can think of a couple of schools that I think are similar, but there aren't many schools that are similar. So let's just break down kind of what we've done here. My specific directive for you is that I don't burden you down with teaching 5 and 6 classes, which is where most STEM folks, hey, well, we're going to hire the STEM guy in, and they're going to teach engineering, and they're going to teach this, and they're going to, and so they end up just, kind of carving them up the whole day. In our situation here, we try to just have you teach 2. You usually volunteer to teach a 3rd one, much to the chagrin of me sometimes, just because you're such a nice guy.
I have to learn to tell the registrar no. You're right.
But give us a little picture. Give kind of the audience a little picture of with that freedom, how does that reshape your STEM program, and what does it look like for you?
Okay, well, let's take a look at next week. Next week we have teachers coming in, and we'll introduce this program to them. They will have walked past the room, and they will have looked in the windows, and they will have wondered what's going on. But we'll introduce it to them with a project, hopefully planting a seed, and so that they will say, that's kind of cool. I think I should go in there sometime. I should take my students in there. And they'll contact me, and they'll say, yeah, I'm going to be teaching, we're going to be reading this particular book, or we're going to be studying this passage of Scripture, we're going to be studying this concept in mathematics or in science. Do you have something we can do? And that's the trick.
That's right.
And I always say yes. Of course we got something to do. I might be scratching my head going, I have no idea what we're going to do. But I always tell them yes. And then I usually go to Google and search for images, or I go to Pinterest and search for pictures. Because if we're going to do least common multiple, for example, with 3rd graders or 4th graders, I type in least common multiple into Google and I look for pictures. I don't look for explanation. I look for pictures, because the pictures will spur something in my mind that says, oh yeah, we could make that.
That's good. That's good.
It's usually the way it works. And so it's not me coming up with all these ideas. It's not some storehouse, although, I do have in all those books probably 600 some lessons, but I actually find I don't use that many of them. I do other things to fit what that teacher is needing at that particular time in the amount of time they have available. Sometimes it's 45 minutes. Sometimes it's 45 minutes a day for 5 days. But to fit what they need to meet their educational objectives. So
let's put rubber meets the road here. Let's give some specific examples. Here you talked about next week with teachers coming back, but let's just talk about some of the, maybe your top 5 projects that you've seen done at all of the different levels. So for those who don't know our school all that well, we're a K-4 to 12 program. So you are not just working with high school children. No. You're working with kids at every level. So maybe just kind of walk us through the nutty examples of some of the things that you're doing to teach principals. When people hear this, they say, oh, well, this is only directly applicable to math and science. You've really proven that wrong, because, again, STEM is a philosophy, not merely a cool elective. So walk us through some of those projects.
Well, for example, the K-4 program, they were studying transportation. So the natural thing is that they come in and we roll Hot Wheels cars down a ramp, or we make little paper airplanes or something like that. I thought, we can do better than that. I discovered that a red plastic cup, 16 ounce, 18 ounce, fits perfect in a piece of 4-inch PVC pipe. So I bought 3 pieces. I stretched them out here in the room. They tape 4 cups together end to end, put some paper around it, draw pictures with windows and all that, and we've got a Hyperloop. And we stick it in one end of the tube, and I put my vacuum cleaner on the other end. And it just, whoop, and it's down to the far end, and their eyes are big, and they're watching it go down through this tube, and they see it disappear down the end. I say, that's some new technology that we're working on for transportation.
See, Elon should be talking to you. That's what he should be. Yeah, that's right.
And then I did some more research on this a couple weeks ago and realized that that technology is not progressing at the rate that they were hoping. But it's still a cool idea, and there's still things to be learned from that. So, that's the Hyperloop. Now these little 4-year-olds, they're going home with these tubes, and wow, this is so cool. And it is something they can duplicate at home. They can buy a piece of PVC pipe for $10, and but that's one example.
Great.
My students then jumped on that when they saw the tube set up, and they said, well, how fast is that going? I said, I don't know. And so we calculated average speed, 21 miles an hour. Well, can we make it go faster? I said, sure you can. Well, what are we going to do? I said, I don't know. And so they started experimenting with different things. They got it up to 55 miles an hour.
Kidding.
It was blowing out the end of the tube and smashing into the glass wall on the far end. Kind of scared me. But and then somebody says, well, what about the acceleration? And well, of course, this is all mathematics that goes beyond 4-year-olds. I said, well, figure it out. So they rigged up a laser photo gate so that when the thing came through, it broke the laser beam and they could time it extremely accurately. They realized it was reaching top speed in 1 meter. And that was pretty cool that they figured all that out. I really didn't do much with it that one. So that was a case where we have this little 4-year-old project that now takes on a different role for lots of different people. In fact, I used it last week for our new families that came in because I needed something. I had 20 minutes to tell them what we're doing in STEM, and I thought, 20 minutes to tell them. I thought, that's kind of dumb. I'm not going to tell them anything. They've got to experience it.
That's right.
And so they all came in. I gave them a written instruction sheet of how to make a Hyperloop capsule, and they all looked at me kind of funny, like, you mean we got to do something? I said, yeah, you got to do something. And so they got started, and after 10 minutes of them working on the Hyperloop, getting it to go down the tank, and they were just excited as a 4-year-old, so they just contained it a little better. And
I walked in on one of those. They were fired up.
They were fired up.
The moms and dads working together.
And then we sat down, and I said, so what's STEM? And they started telling me about what's learned in this room by doing these projects.
That's awesome.
And I thought, okay.
No one's doing that, Brad.
So now you're telling me exactly what I would have been telling you, but since it's coming from you and you're doing the talking, you're doing the learning.
That's right. The project's on Monday morning.
Yes. Other projects, the Bible class came in. There's a lot of lamps in the Bible. So we formed clay into lamps and poured oil in them, made wicks, took them out and burned them.
You were taking down Jericho's walls, weren't you, at one point in time?
We did take down Jericho's walls. I kind of keep an eye on the trash cans, and the IT department had a whole bunch of boxes, and they were all perfect size. They were all 16 inches square. I must have had 120 of those boxes, and we made Jericho's wall. And then another physics class was making catapults, so we made a couple of big catapults that threw basketballs, and we went out and knocked down Jericho's walls with basketballs.
You've made the ark.
Yes, we've messed around with the ark. We do have a tank. It's a 20-foot long tank, a foot wide, 6 inches deep, and we have students build. We just take foam and carve it up. And I really like that project because it's not about the speed of the boat. The students get paid for the weight they haul, but they get charged for the power that they use. So there's another cup that falls from the ceiling that pulls their boat through the tank. So yeah, they can go faster if they put more power in it. Well, but the more power is going to cost them more money. And so now it becomes a trade-off thing. So that's another pretty neat project. We had...
and again, the principles that are involved in that, this is so much more than putting a toy boat in a tank that's hauling weight. The principles that are involved in that encompass transportation. They encompass import-export. They encompass all of the freight liners. They encompass every port that we have that is thriving here in the state of Georgia. The port in Savannah, I think, is the 4th busiest port in the world. we look at all of those things being taught from the simple exercise that's being done in a STEM classroom that are taking principles and applying the why of education.
Exactly.
So that these kids can see why. Why do I learn these principles? Well, why? Because this could literally lead to something that you are passionate about for all of your days.
Now, when you talk about passion, there's so we do all this stuff. And, the students come in, they enjoy it. They enjoy doing the projects, but some of them really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And to some of them, this is just the highlight of their day.
This is going to become life.
And so I've been thinking about that. I thought, okay, we have a private Christian school, and we have very good students, and they do a very good job, and they're all successful in college and all those measurements. But we have students that struggle academically, and they kind of wonder if they fit. And they're not the athletes, so they don't really have that niche. They're not musicians or actors, so they're not really that niche either. But they are good in here. And they're good at figuring things out, and they're good at making things, and they're good at this technical component.
That's right.
When I was in high school, elementary, middle school, high school, I was always a little bit embarrassed of my gift because God had definitely gifted me in the ability to make stuff. I liked making stuff, but I was always making a mess. And I was messing with Dad's tools. And Dad realized the importance of me messing with his tools, but nobody else really did. Because the garage was always a mess and we could never get the car in there, and I was always getting chastised for, you're making such a mess. And my dad made a shop for me in the basement. Oh, you're always making such a mess. So I was always a little bit hesitant with my gift. I took shop class in high school kind of like, people saying, oh, you probably shouldn't take too many shop classes and hang out with those guys, those gearhead guys. And I thought, but I am a gearhead guy.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I was always a little bit embarrassed of that. And I'm hoping that these students that come in here, that are here, standing at the door at 7:30 in the morning, waiting for me to get here, and I kick them out at 5 at night saying, guys, it's time to go home. They're in here eating lunch. Guys, you can't, clean up, you're okay, but please throw your food away. But God has gifted them.
That's right.
In this way.
Yeah.
And
be nice to them because we're all going to work for them. So.
Yes, we are.
That's right.
But we're all going to rely on them to fix stuff for us.
That's right.
But more than that, there's a confidence that they gain.
Yes.
That God gifted me in this. One of the devotions that I do with them is I introduce them to Oholiab and Bezalel. Well, they've never heard of Oholiab and Bezalel. And I said, take a look at this passage. It's in Exodus 33 and 34. I think there's another message.
Craftsman of the ark, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I said, notice where they got the skill. It said God gave them the spirit of craftsmanship.
Right.
That came from God.
Right.
It's
their calling.
These students that come in here and they're excited about this, they're not really excited about anything else, but they're excited about this. God gifted them in this area.
That's right.
And we need to develop that gift for his glory. And so that's what we do. So other things like one of the middle school classes, they make an application. They do some research, and they find a person or an organization that deserves a monument. And they make a proposal to make this monument for this notable person, and they outline why they deserve a monument. And then they come in here and build a scale model of it. And we put them on display, and we have judges from the community come in. We have another teacher that does a book on civil rights. And they come in here and do a project depicting a scene from that book. And something has to move in their scene. We have another one that they read a book about an artist in Washington, D.C. who made his art he was a custodian. And so he'd picked up trash out of the trash cans.
Found objects,
and his artwork now in the Smithsonian has a big dedicated room for his artwork. Of course, they didn't find the artwork until after he died, and they cleaned out his storeroom. And so they read that story. So they come in here and they make art, but the art has to depict some spiritual component of their lives. and communicate that through art made with found objects.
Right.
Now, I had a student come in, at the end of the school year. She'd come running in here and she says, "I want you to put this on display." And so I have it sitting here on top of the shelf. She was so proud of that. So that type of thing.
Right. Brad, when we first met each other, when this was kicking off, the day when I felt so confirmed that we were heading in the right direction. For those of you who have not been to our campus, we have a Navy airplane hanging from our ceiling, and Brad did that as a project. The renovation of that airplane, he did that as a project with kids. So they had to learn how to pop rivet, and they had to learn how to do everything with there. But I came in and you had the kids do a presentation for me on the motor mount that was at the back, because I wanted the fan, I wanted the motor to work, and or at least the fan to spin. And you had the kids; they were super excited. They had bought a fan that you had approved.
They bought a real cheap ceiling fan.
Yeah, and they gave me this beautiful presentation. I'll be honest, I thought it was great. I thought, wow, these kids they understood how much power it had and how much it was going to draw, how fast it was going to spin. They went through this whole thing, and I was duly impressed. And then you walked out with me when we left the room, and you said, "Hey, James, just so you know, that's not going to work." And I thought, what? And you said, "Yeah, it's totally not going to work. They actually haven't done the math right on this area, and they haven't considered the weight of the blade and everything." And I thought, but you're going to let them fail. He said, "Yeah, that's part of the process." And I walked back to my office and thought, wow, we are so fortunate to have somebody here who's going to let a kid buy the wrong product, present information and they're going to let them fail, so that they'll have to find the why of education and come back. And now that motor spins beautifully here on the ceiling of our lab, and it's great.
Well, and that's something where educators require. There's a lot of skills to be a good educator, and those skills end up being developed over years usually. But some students, I would not have done that, because some students. Failure is a problem.
Sure.
And the two boys that were working on that, 2 or 3, they were capable of handling that.
That's right.
But others would not. And so that's why you can't just go by the textbook. That's why the curriculum cannot be a machine. That's why teachers have master's degrees or more, because it's necessary for them to have those skills to adjust things to the current situation. We've often, as I was writing textbooks, we often joked about having a teacher-proof curriculum so the teachers couldn't mess it up. Well, then I realized just how foolish that was.
That's right.
Because it's the teacher that makes it.
That's right.
And so the teacher would look at that project and say, well, I better step in and make sure these kids are successful on the first try, because they don't have the capacity to try it a second time. Whereas those particular kids did.
Yeah.
And now other situations, I won't allow that.
Sure.
But in that situation,
I love that they were responsible for the budget, just like they would in the real world.
Yes.
And I left that room that day thinking, I think you just changed those kids' lives. Like, those kids, their lives will be changed because of being involved in this project. They'll come back in here as graduates and say, I built that plane to their kids one day.
Yeah.
And who knows, they may be in fields. Their calling may be in fields that were directly tied to that experience.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is, in the essence, that STEM education. Let's chat for a second. STEM education looks a lot different at other schools. First of all, it's kind of this kitschy thing that a lot of schools feel like they have to offer STEM, and they call it STEAM, and they call it. I mean, it seems like they're forever adding acronyms to it, but we just call it STEM here. And again, we talk about it being philosophical. In a lot of programs, it looks really different. Sometimes it like I've had friends who have said that, wow, we built a STEM lab, and it just looks like a computer lab. Like, you already have a computer lab. So what is so you're going to add coding. That's all you're going to do. Why is this different, and how do people go wrong? Like, what's the advice we give for people who are designing STEM programs?
I'm not sure that STEM is a good word.
Okay.
If I had a different name for it, I'd call it something different. I'd love to call this lab something to do with Oholiab and Bezalel. But Bezalel is hard to say. Oholiab sounds like a Christmas carol.
Right.
We can't call it the BO lab. So,
but and I think our sign is in the shot, at least on YouTube. We call it the STEM Lab, but it's called the Center of Innovation.
Yes, and I like the Center of Innovation. I like that one. But STEM is what people understand.
Right.
So when we look at just STEM itself, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. I tell my students that's the wrong order. It's actually science, and then mathematics, and then engineering and technology. But I said SMET would be a really bad looking sign. I don't want to call it the SMET program. But if we confine ourselves to the acronym,
right,
then anything that we do to enhance science, or we apply mathematics, or we do some engineering, we can call it a STEM program.
Sure.
And we can keep doing all the same things we've done before. We just do a little bit more of them.
Right.
And so that's where my definition of STEM differs. I have trouble finding people that agree with me on this. I've often thought, okay, so am I a leader? I've always thought I'm lacking one thing from being a leader, and that is I'm lacking followers. So is there anybody else out there that's going to define STEM the way I do? Well, maybe not. But STEM is a pedagogy, and it's a pedagogy where we're using carefully designed projects, carefully designed and well-executed projects to reach our educational objective, not confined to the acronym of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but yet science, technology, engineering, mathematics probably become the pathway, because it's awfully hard to do a project without doing one of those four or several of those four, but it becomes the pathway for other learning. Okay, for example, one of our literature classes reads the Animal Farm book. And in the book, the pigs convince the rest of the farm animals that they need a windmill. So we go through the book and figure out how many watts do you need to fulfill the promises made by the pigs. How big of windmill do you need to produce that many watts? Well, then we have to, we better figure out what the prevailing winds are at that location. But then we take cups, we use a big paper cup, and we make a windmill. And they design their own wind. Because of limited time, they make the windmill all pretty much the same, but then they design the blades. Some of them have multiple blades that are huge, and some of them have a few blades that are small. But as it spins, we put a fan on it, and as it spins, we have it wrap up a string and lift weight from the floor. Well, as soon as we're lifting weight, now we're doing work. So now we can use our physics equations to determine horsepower, and we can convert that to watts. And so now we can figure out, we're going to need 1 million of these, literally 1 million of these little windmills to power that milking machine that the pigs promised. But it ties it all together.
That's right.
So even though...
Well, and it takes the kid who, again, I taught literature, so that was my field, but it takes the kid who doesn't enjoy George Orwell as much, yes. And it lets them have something where it's directly applicable to the things that they're interested in as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
So along that line, we did a curriculum project a few years ago where we went out and bought toys, because toys, there's nothing in a toy store that's not applicable, interesting to a student. So we bought toys and we wrote lessons based on those toys. Sometimes we come in here and we set up the Hot Wheels track. And now let's just play with Hot Wheels. What can we do with Hot Wheels? Of course, immediately we start talking about speed and time and distance to figure speed, but we can do more than that. What about the acceleration as we drop? Okay, if we drop this far here and we rise that far there, are we going to make it over that hill? Let's do some calculations. So the toy is something that they relate to, mm-hmm. But now let's use that as a foundation for something else.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
I see one of the things I've seen over the years with the increase in educational standards. And, we've got to do educational standards. We've got to meet this standard and this standard and this standard. Well, yeah, I'm all in favor of standards. But it sure makes education a lot less relatable to the kid. I mean, do they really care about order of operations as a fourth grader? What is it about order of operations that interests a fourth grader? At least when we're talking about fractions, we can cut up a pizza. And I'm not sure anybody's ever taught fractions without a pizza. When I was writing textbooks, I thought, I am not going to use a pizza to teach fractions. No way, I'm not going to do that. I'm also never going to put baking soda and vinegar to make a volcano.
All right, so let's chat about the STEM and how you have applied it in our community as well. You've done some pretty awesome projects where you've involved parents and grandparents with their children and grandchildren, and have really made a huge impact on our community as well.
Parents and kids need a chance to work together, because a lot of times when we do things, it's for the kid, and the parents have to endure it. You do something that's fun for the whole family, and well, okay, so we're going to go play video games. Fun for the whole family, yeah, right. Or parents sit on the sidelines and the bleachers, and the student and the child is out on the field. Well, let's do something where we can get them working together. So I started doing boat building. Started this years and years ago. And I thought, instead of something that takes the parents away from the kid for another evening, let's do something where we can bring them in. Well, what can we do? Well, let's do something that's big. It's got to be big because we've got to have room for lots of people to all get their hands on it. And it should be something that takes more than one set of hands. So it's not just dad looking over the shoulder of the kid. And boats worked out well for that. And so, I don't know, well over 300 boats, with various projects and stuff. And what I find, it really has nothing to do with the boat. The boat is just the vehicle for the experience.
That's right. Relationships.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of times parents and the kids really don't know how to work well together. The parents start taking the tools away from the kids. And so I go over, grab another tool. And there have been times when the dad's standing there with a drill in each hand, and the kid still has a drill. Where'd you get that? I've got a bunch of drills. I'll keep handing the student a drill. And I do my explaining to the student.
Right.
Not to the parent, because I don't want that. I want them working together and figuring things out together. I'd really underestimated the value of that. And then another thing that dads in particular, they don't sit around and talk. They need to focus on something. And so we have this room full of dads and kids and well, in one situation, we limited it to dads and sons. They didn't know each other. They had a common denominator. They had children in a special needs school, but they didn't know each other. There was no community among those men because they don't get together and go out for coffee. That's not what guys do. They build stuff. They work on stuff. So they came in here, and we had 11 on a Saturday morning. We had 11 chassis set out on the floor, and we had a store on the side of the room, and with all the other parts they needed. And we told them, the child has to come to the store. Parent can't. Child comes to the store. And so they'd talk about, okay, what do we need? Well, we need 2 back wheels. Okay, why don't you go get 2 back wheels? So now the child goes over, walks up to the store manager and says, I need 2 back wheels. Okay, they're piled right there. And I need nuts to hold the wheels on. Well, what size nuts are they? Well, I don't know. They'd run back over, ask Dad. But in the meantime, the parents start talking.
Right.
The dads start talking. Right. And it was a very powerful thing. Now, of course, we went outside, and we got these little push cars, little T-bucket hot rods made out of a wheelbarrow. They're cute little cars.
They're great.
They're cute little cars.
Cool.
But it was a much more valuable experience for, the child gained a lot of confidence because now they could put a nut on a bolt, and they could get the right size wrench, and they could tighten that bolt down, and that was a pretty big deal. But an awful lot of value was in those parents getting together.
That's right.
And them talking things over and just developing some community. We went outside with them. And of course, we had to push them down the hill and see who could go the fastest and all that. You know, the dads were really into that. And but it was just a really good experience. Now, the thing about that particular project, and many of these adult projects that we do, family projects we do, they're a lot of work.
Yes.
Those little T-bucket hot rods, we probably put in 6 to 8, probably 8 working hours for every car.
Wow.
And they came in and did 3 hours to finish it up.
Right.
They thought they had built it, and it looked like they'd built it, and they were very proud of their building, but we had a lot of people
work went
up
in
front.
beforehand. Yeah.
And I thought, okay, was it worth it? Was it worth it for me to put in 40 to 50 hours of work so that they could do 3 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Then I realized, no, that project wasn't done when it went home. It was together, it rolled, it steered, but it hadn't been painted.
Mm-hmm.
It hadn't been customized. It hadn't been doctored up. It didn't have a seat in it.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole summer worth of activities going on there.
And you provided that opportunity
Yes.
for relationship building
Yes.
through that project. I've loved how here on our main campus, you've done a canoe building project with families. You built some really cool race cars last year, motorized race cars with families where they're coming in for family project building. The project you're referencing here, just so that everybody understands, we have a second school associated with our school. We went through our inaugural year last year at Lions Learning Academy, which is a school just for kids with special needs. And that can have families who are really lonely, parents who aren't connected. And you provided an opportunity for connection. And I heard from families after that. I heard from dads that said, this was the first time that I understood how to have fun with my son. Because of some of the educational challenges that he has. Dad feels like all he is a perpetual corrector rather than somebody who's having fun. And we saw confidence built in those kids' lives. It's those types of things. Again, it's the why of education.
Yes.
It's that further application. Brad, as we're wrapping up here, I'm always so pleased with your biblical application. You are constantly tying in faith and the truth of God's word into the field of STEM. You've added a bunch of pictures around this room, 24 of them. It's a further expression of your heart for STEM and the biblical application of STEM. Walk us through kind of what you've added here most recently to the room.
Well, what happens with science particular is that there's, and I saw this teaching at the university level and throughout my career, that there's science and then there's faith. And you kind of have to go with one or the other because the two can't mix, as oil and water, and a man of faith cannot be a man of science because they contradict each other, because the first verse of Genesis said that God made it, and well, we know that's not true because we have this scientific evidence. Well, no, that's a lie. It's simply a lie straight from hell. God created science. The only reason we have science is because God made things the way he did. And we're figuring those things out and we're seeing God. And so I want my students coming out of here with a confidence that there's not going to come a time where science definitively proves that there is no God. There's not going to come a time when there's this discovery, there's this experiment that's done, there's this new thing that come along, and we said, oh, that's it. This God thing is now debunked. Never going to happen.
Never going to happen.
And I want my students to realize it's never going to happen. And so we started looking for quotes from famous scientists, engineers, inventors, where they acknowledge that there is a creative, infinitely intelligent being behind this, that there is no other way. So we started looking for those quotes. And so we have Werner von Braun and what he says about it. We have Thomas Edison. We have a quote from him. We have a quote from Charles Darwin, which actually, when I saw that quote, I was actually kind of surprised. But it appears from this quote that his theory has been elaborated to the point that he probably would no longer support it.
Right. It exceeded his
It exceeded his intentions. But other mathematicians, we have a guy here that's is kind of the father of quantum physics, and he said that I really like his quote. It says, I can look at it here. Werner Heisenberg. He says, the first gulp from the glass of natural science will turn you into an atheist. But at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you.
I love that quote.
I love that quote.
Yeah.
And that's what I see. A little bit of knowledge. We say, oh, that, I see relationships between different species of birds, and I see connections between birds and reptiles and eggs with birds and birds with fish. And I see some commonalities between all those things. So maybe they have a common ancestor. So with a basic understanding, you say, oh yeah, that's possible. But the depth, when you get to the depth, no, it cannot be. And I want my students to have that confidence that no, it can't be. And I'm not standing alone. I'm not the only person here that thinks that God made this place. Well, look at what Isaac Newton said. Look at what Copernicus said. Look at what Thomas Edison said. Look at what Alexander Graham Bell said. I'm not alone in this.
That's right. One of my father's best friends, he was a statistician for NASA. That's kind of how he made his career. He actually came to know God in his second PhD in mathematics. He eventually had 3, but he came to know him. And I remember as a kid, he would come and he'd visit us quite often. He was a single guy, but he was fun. So he'd played hide and seek with us outside, and we just always had a great time with him. But I remember as I was like a teenager, he said that in his study of mathematics for his second PhD, he found that at the end of mathematics was God. That he said mathematic principles are perfectly aligned with theology.
Yes.
And it's pretty awesome to be in a school teaching a subject that is so directly applicable like STEM, where we're making an impact on kids' lives from their thinking, from their pedagogy, but also from their vocational calling, and from their eternal destination. All of those things take place in this space every day, and it's pretty awesome. Brad, it really and truly is a pleasure. It's a privilege to serve with you.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for the opportunity. When you showed me around that first day, and you said, we're going to do this, we're going to make this room this way, and so on. You said, and you're going to have a 25-foot high ceiling. I said, well, if we got a 25-foot high ceiling, I said, I want to hang an airplane in there. And you said, yeah, we can get a model airplane. I said, no, I want a real airplane. And then your eyes lit up. And yeah, that sounds great. And I thought, I want to work with that guy. But then I thought, we're not there yet. And so then I thought, the facility management guy has to hang it. And I thought that's gonna stop this project. And then the facilities management guy, he says, "Oh yeah, we can do that. That'll beam will hold." I really hope they hire me. I want to work with those two guys. This is going to be so much fun to get to run this direction. And we talked about the students, the particular students that really like this area. We have the same thing with the spiritual component of the STEM devotions that we do. There are some students that really relates to them, and they say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Because we seldom hear a sermon on the mathematics of Noah's Ark, for example. We seldom hear sermons on the technical components in the Bible. We seldom hear sermons on how God has actually put things together. But yet that's how some people think.
That's right.
But that's not how pastors usually think. But that's how some people think in the pews. And so it's just, you've provided, by having this room, you have provided a means for God to speak to different people in different ways.
That's right.
That we don't normally reach.
Yeah, God's doing big things here at HCA,
Yes.
and the best is yet to come. Brad, thanks for jumping on the show today.
Yeah, this has been enjoyable. I've enjoyed our visit. Thank you.
Thanks so much.